Well, hello and welcome to the Cross to Bear podcast. I'm Phil Bear, your host, and we just kind of threw this together at the last minute today. And today I'm going to have my friend Richard Suttles, who has gone by the moniker the Faithiest Atheist for a long time, but I think he's kind of changed his brand a little bit, and maybe he can tell us a little bit about that. And today I want to talk about the the election and just provide a few comments and thoughts and hopefully wisdom about the election and what its implications are going to be for us. So let me bring Richard on real quick and welcome Richard Suttles, the fallen ape theist now. So
Yeah.
greetings, Richard. How are you?
Hello. Hey, thanks for having me again.
Yeah. Well, it's always a pleasure to have you because I enjoy interacting with you, and not only that, but I always learn something whenever I have you on. And so I could you could actually accuse me of being selfish whenever I have you on because I always want to learn new things, and I can guarantee that I'm going to learn something new whenever I have you on. So that might be a little bit self-serving. You can hopefully you can forgive me for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And do me a favor and give me the 30-second rundown of your background a little bit for those of you who are not familiar with you. You can
Uh,
make it quick and short.
yeah, sure. So even though I'm not a Christian, I was raised Christian. I was very much raised a conservative. Back in the '80s, you could be a conservative and not be Christian. I'll throw this book out there for anyone who's curious how that could be. Conflict of Visions, Thomas Sowell. Plenty of Christian conservatives still love Thomas Sowell, even though he's not a member of the faith. But we were raised in the '80s in southern Georgia to just believe that there needs to be traditions and systems that kind of hold people together, institutions, and that these are important. And they can be religious, that's fine, as long as they're effective and they hold people together and they give something some sort of purpose for the community. So yeah, that's how I was raised. So even though I left Christianity, I still get along with a lot of Christians because I'm still very much that kind of conservative.
Yeah, and you and I get along pretty well most of the time.
Yeah, we do.
I don't I don't know that we've ever gotten into a knockdown drag out about anything.
And
Although
even if we did, there's people that that we just absolutely don't see eye to eye, but we still get along. We can still say, okay, let's get a pizza and drop it for now.
well, and the other thing that you do for me, and I think you do this for a lot of Christians, is you keep us honest.
I try.
You don't throw softball questions at us, and you're not going to let us get away with any kind of lack of intellectual integrity. Let's put it that way.
I try.
So
About the biggest thing, the biggest thing I bring to the table is that we have a tendency to fall into a narrative, and so say that people on the left, the people on the left that will say something like Trump is a racist and he's a Nazi and he's going to bring fascism to America, and so they're stuck on that narrative and they won't quit. But what that can lead to is that some people on the right are like, no, Trump's amazing and he'll always love us and he'll do whatever we tell him to do. That's another narrative. And so I try to say both of those narratives are actually not aligned with reality. So
right.
I try to say, okay, you can be against this left Nazi thing, but also be realistic. He may or may not. He might provide wonderful policies, but he also might change his mind on that.
Well, one of the things though that I think we have as a huge advantage right now is that we've already seen one Trump term.
Yeah, that's true.
So we have seen what he does. We've seen him perform, and so usually you can pretty much rely on a, someone like Trump to be consistent with what he has done in the past during his past term. There were a lot of people who were scared to death when Trump was elected in 2016
That's right.
because they thought he was a loose cannon, and they were just terrified. They didn't know what to expect. he made all these grand promises during his campaign. They didn't know whether he was going to follow through. And conservatives had made the observation that traditionally in the past, Trump has always been a liberal. And he always rubbed shoulders with the Democrats and so on,
Mhm.
including Hillary Clinton. And so there was really this high level of uncertainty and anxiety when he took office in 2017.
Mhm.
But now, when people look back on that, I remember Ben Shapiro making the observation that he thought Trump was going to be a disaster, but it turned out that he actually governed in a far more conservative way than he ever dreamed he would.
Mhm.
And the other observation that people have also made was that during his first term, he actually kept the majority of his campaign promises, which was just unheard of in American politics.
Mhm.
So, so a lot of people, I think, voted for him because they saw what he did in the past, and they believe that he gave us a prosperous economy, one that is far more prosperous than it is now, and and that the way he did that was he kind of removed the barriers that government often puts in front of the American people just to prevent them from being prosperous. So, like regulations and taxation are the two biggest barriers that government puts into our path as roadblocks. And he wanted to remove those roadblocks, and he did remove those roadblocks, and that actually unleashed an economy that was far greater than it had been in a long time. So there is a little bit of a known quantity that we have now as an advantage that we didn't have the last time. And a lot of times people have told me recently, oh, I wouldn't vote for Trump because he's unpredictable, and you never know what he's going to do. He could reverse a lot of these policies, and he might turn on you. And my response to that is, well, it's possible. I guess it's possible that anyone that we vote for that we want to represent us could turn on us. I think that's probably a possibility, no matter who the candidate is.
That's true.
But I think though that Trump has been fairly consistent, and so I just consider it. I consider the likelihood that he's going to turn on us to be rather low, based on the data that I can draw from in the past. So, what I wanted to do today was I wanted to go through my top 10 benefits of a Trump presidency, and I wanted to get your comments on them.
Okay.
And and then I want you to give us some of your insights on what you what Christians or evangelicals or conservatives in general might want to watch out for when it comes to a Trump presidency in
Okay.
2020 in 2025 and for the next 4 years.
Okay.
And because a lot of people kind of had this euphoria right now, don't they?
Yes. Well,
You
I
know,
see
you
some of it. I see some of it. You
yeah,
know, and
yeah.
we're so big on teams that I've seen people go from, like, say, early January of this year, who are like, okay, I'm going to hold my nose and vote for Trump, even though he's, I don't think he's going to be representing us. I've seen him go from that to like full on Trump warriors, mostly because on Twitter, Trump warrior is rewarded. Your likes go up, your attention goes up, your interaction goes up, because Elon and Ben Shapiro are absolutely pushing Trump warrior, Trump great, Trump's going to be wonderful, and maybe he is. I think Elon and Ben Shapiro are both very adept and skilled. I just think they're much more adept and skilled than Trump is. So I think the Trumpism platform is much different now than it was in 2016. In 2016, there was a lot of Alex Jones going on, and Mr. Pillow Guy, and they're less impressive intellectually than, say, Ben Shapiro and Elon Musk. So
Right.
he's got different warriors on his side now, and so there are some conservatives who've kind of gotten into that, and they're hoping for the best. And if Trump interacting with Elon Musk and Ben Shapiro for the next 4 years, then we might see great things for the next 4 years. We'll see.
Well, and it's I've had a hard time forcing myself, I guess, to remember that you're not just voting for one person.
Yep.
You're voting for a team. You're voting for someone, and you're voting for that person's allies.
Yep.
And so, what are his allies like? And in his first presidency, it was the first time that he had ever held any political office. I mean, can you believe that?
Yeah.
What was so extraordinary about his first term was that it was the first public office he had ever held. He'd never been a governor. He'd never been a senator. He'd never been a congressman or a mayor or anybody like that. And suddenly now he's running for president and he gets elected president, and that's his first public office. And so, I mean, I knew back then this guy's going to make a lot of mistakes. He's going to make a lot of rookie mistakes, and he's going to gather some people around him that are not going to be the best people, but he doesn't have any experience at building a cabinet. And so
But
he's,
yeah,
he's probably going to,
I just want to say, yeah, you're right. He picked some people who weren't great, but then he picked like maybe the greatest national security advisor we've ever had, who didn't last long, but he did last long enough to write our national security policy, which is still our national security
yeah,
strategy. So
yeah.
like he picked some good people too.
Yeah.
That first
Yeah,
time.
that's right. He did. He picked some good people, and I think what's in his mind right now. I think
Uh,
what's running through Trump's mind at this very
uh,
moment. I can read his mind all the way from here.
yeah.
I think what's going through his mind now is I'm going to do things better. I'm going to avoid the mistakes that I made in my first term. And I'm going to make this a better presidency because now I have the benefit of experience and wisdom and hindsight. And not only that, but he has the benefit of being a stark contrast to what we've seen in the last 4 years under Biden and Harris. And so I think that I think he is concerned about the American people because, I know that this is a campaign slogan and I know that this is a very trite thing for him to say, but I do think that he has a point when he says, I didn't have to do this and I don't have to do this. I could just rest on my laurels and my riches in Mar-a-Lago for the rest of my life. I don't have to go through all this brain damage. I don't need this kind of brain damage in my life. I could live a much more quiet and peaceful life. But he's willing to do it, I think partly because he cares about the American people, but I'm also sure that what you're going to say is that it's partly because of his ego as well. So,
Right.
and that's
Yeah.
probably true.
Yeah, I want to throw this out before you do your 10 things, because I'm going to let you get through those 10 things without much pushback, because I think he'll probably do fine. It's probably going to be good for him. The Biden administration might end up being good for him. I want to throw out the concept that he probably should have done his acceptance speech in 2017 and then quit and then said, hey, okay, there's no way I'm putting up with this. And then started a radio show and from the top of Trump Tower and just had, the Trump show from here on out and given it to Mike Pence. Had Mike Pence taken over in 2017, every personal debacle that happened with Trump wouldn't have happened with Pence. All the attacks would have still happened. All the mainstream media and left wing attacks still would have happened. Mike Pence would have kept his composure and his discipline. You still would have gotten the three Supreme Court nominees because those three spots would still have happened. Mike Pence would have still picked the same three people because Mitch McConnell picked those, and Mike Pence would have signed off on them. So you'd have your same three Supreme Court justices. You would have won in 2020 because the only hunger in 2020 was not Trump. It wasn't anti-conservative. It was just non-Trump because his complaining turned off enough conservative and independents that they just didn't want him. And all they needed was a palatable Democrat. So they didn't want Bernie or Elizabeth Sanders. And so they got Joe Biden, which back then they were like, okay, as long as it's not Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth, I forgot her name. I just
Elizabeth
said it.
Warren?
Yeah, yeah. As long as it's not them and it's somebody who's palatable. He had a long conservative history as a conservative Democrat back then. So he was a palatable, not Trump. and that's what won. That's what got 81 million votes, is a palatable, not Trump. In 2020, there was, the COVID was making people angry. People blamed Trump for COVID, although I agree it's not his fault. And then they blamed some of the race riots. There was a fair or not, was blamed on the Trump administration. So you had that anger going forth in 2020, and the Biden, not Trump, won against Trump. Had that been Pence, I think Pence would have had 65% of the popular vote, and it would have just been a blowout against Bernie. It probably would have been Pence versus Bernie, and Pence would have won that easily. Then right now we'd be looking at another Pence victory against whoever the Democrats had to offer, and so we would now be on Pence's second term today, with those same three Supreme Courts, and probably a lot more of the House and Senate in control. Now, that being said, you now have all that back. You have the House and the Senate back. Trump is in control, and you have those same three things. So I think you're fine now. But I've always told conservatives that 2020 to 2024 could have been just a cakewalk, because you would have had Pence in charge, and you probably would have had a lot more House and Senate control, because Pence doesn't break. If the mainstream media is screaming at him, and the left are screaming at him, and they're making up all these accusations, Pence is going to walk out. He's going to have his composure. He's going to speak very well, very educated conservative policies. It would have just been a debacle for the Democrats, rather than a debacle for the conservatives. So I've always said conservatives kind of earned that nightmare, because Trump was not personally up for that battle. And he's the single point of failure for 2020. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Somebody like Mike Pence would have saved you guys from that. Now you're back. The Democrats screwed it up. You're back in. Trump's back in, maybe with lessons learned. So you can do your top 10, and I probably won't push back on any of these things.
Well, dang it. That's no fun. I want you to push back on him, because I'm going to push back on something that you just said.
Okay.
Because you make a lot of valid points, but there's one factor that I didn't hear from you, and I want to start off with a question. Did you see my series with Tim Stratton and Josh Klein on Marxism?
Oh yeah. In terms of post-Marxism and things like that, and I did see that. I've always said that's a problem that you guys have to deal with.
Well, and so the reason I bring it up is because I don't think that very many people understand the role that critical theory played in the tumultuous Trump years from 2016 to 2020.
Right, I agree, but I've always said that Mike Pence would have kept his composure during all of that, and he would have presented very clear pushback on that, without breaking character and without freaking out and without doing anything that the independents or the other conservatives would have misconstrued.
Okay. Well, I don't know what it is that Trump did that was somehow inferior to what Pence would have done. I didn't see.
Panicking.
Let me just say real quick. I didn't see Trump lose his composure. What I saw him do was I saw him take strong steps in order to suppress the influence of critical race theory in government, so that you didn't get critical race theory training in government agencies.
Yeah.
And I didn't view that as Trump losing his composure. I view that as swift retribution that he leveled against critical race theory, because critical race theory and critical theory in general is unbelievably destructive to the American way of life, and it is far more divisive than Trump could ever dream of being in this country.
Right.
So
we won't ever fight about post-Marxism and critical race theory. I'm just saying that during those same implementations, Pence would have done that without any. What are the things that Congress had to go through? All the things that Trump got, the impeachment and all that sort of stuff. None of that would have happened, because you wouldn't have had any perfect phone call. you wouldn't have had anything like that. Everything would have been above board. Um, everything would have been every all of his speeches would have been very meticulously, just like he did. Mike Pence never broke character. He never had any shady phone calls that even his own policymakers told him not to make. And you would have had all of your critical race theory policies implemented just as swiftly without the embarrassment of Trump's behavior during those 4 years.
That's interesting, because I didn't, the way that I saw that and the way that I interpreted that, and how I see things and how I interpret things is that's the absolute standard of for all conservatives and all Christians everywhere. So what Phil Bear thinks about it should be the watershed factor in all this. No,
Well,
I'm trying to tell some bad dad jokes. But let me just saw what I was going to say. The way that I saw that was, I don't think they hated Trump because of his behavior. I think they hated Trump and wanted to impeach him because he was a threat to their Marxist agenda, to their socialist agenda, and to their woke agenda. Yeah. And anybody that was going to be a threat to that left-wing agenda is going to be a target no matter who he is. It just so happens that Trump was an easier target than Pence would have been. But they still would have launched those same attacks against a Pence that they did against Trump, because their fundamental reaction to their left wing and to their Marxist ideology that was just as much a threat, and they panicked because of that just as much as they would have with anybody else.
Yeah, they would have tried to do whatever they could, but what Pence would not have offered them is when he was under investigation. So like when Trump was under the original investigation, and I forget now, Robert Mueller, it's been so long now. So when that investigation first happened, Trump hired the best lawyers, and they came in and they said, "Hey, there's nothing here. This Mueller's report, when it does come out, is going to say, hey, there's nothing here." His campaign manager was in trouble, but he got his punishment. But there was nothing that showed that Trump, from behind his desk, said, "Hey, we're going to do this, dastardly thing, and I'm going to be behind it." His lawyer said, "All that's going to happen, you ignore it. You go back to work. You just be the best president you need to be. Ignore it. Never say perfect investigation, or never say stop the investigation." But he didn't do that. He worried about the investigation, and he was constantly telling people, "Make this go away." That's what the Mueller investigation showed, was that on 10 occasions he did try to get people to make the investigation go away when he never had to. When his lawyer said, "It's not going to hurt you, not going to harm you. You can only damage yourself." Trump got rid of those lawyers and fought it anyway. Now the Mueller report still came out and said there's nothing there other than these 10 attempts. And then Bill Barr said, "Okay, well, despite these 10 attempts, we can't impeach him for that." So it still went away. But Mike Pence would have done what the lawyer said, which is, "Hey, there's nothing here. I invite the investigation. Investigate away. Nothing to see here." He still would have implemented all your critical race theories. He never would have said, "Make the investigation go away." He never would have tweeted against it. All of the anger, all of the vitriol wouldn't have existed. And whenever a reporter said, "Hey, what do you think about this investigation?" Mike Pence would have said, "What are you talking about?" Oh yeah, please bring it. I look forward to it. Look forward to the results. I can't wait to hear what Mr. Mueller has to say. And then it would have come out that there was nothing there, which is what Donald Trump was advised by the lawyers at the very beginning, and he just wouldn't trust the process.
So you think the left would have been a whole lot more sanguine about that kind of a response from Pence?
They would have given him everything they had. It's just that Mike Pence wouldn't have earned it. He wouldn't have earned it. And the thing that Trump did wrong was he kept earning the vitriol by being vitriolic back. And all you had to do was just keep your composure and say, "Hey, go ahead, bring it. I'll look forward to it." And he couldn't do that. And that's what Mike Pence would have done, and it's what Ron DeSantis would do now if he was the candidate. And again, Trump won, so great. But what you guys are going to be dealing with for the next 4 years is somebody who's not good at controlling himself when he's under attack.
Okay, well, let's talk about that a little bit more. But first, I want to go through my 10 benefits of a Trump presidency. And and I mean, feel free to push back on any of these. I
Well,
don't, I
because
don't, I don't, I don't.
the thing is that like the progressive would fight you on critical race theory and all that sort of stuff, and I'm not going to do that. So we're probably going to
Yeah.
have a lot, and plus I'm generally conservative, so I'll probably agree with most of your points.
Okay. Well, let's try to disagree in some sense. That way we can be a little bit more entertaining for our audience.
Okay.
But so you can be feisty and vitriolic. You can put your Trump hat on and be. But the first one,
Do I have a
the first benefit of a Trump presidency for the next 4 years, I think, is going to be the murder of a great many unborn children will be prevented. I'm not saying that the murder of all unborn children will be prevented, but I believe that the murder of a great many unborn children will be prevented that would have been murdered through abortion under a Harris regime. Because many people have pointed out that Trump does not have a perfect posture on pro-life. He doesn't have a perfect pro-life posture, and I agree he doesn't have a perfect pro-life posture. His position on the pro-life issue does not actually pass my personal test for where I think he should be. However, the idea that there is this even parity between his posture on abortion and Harris' posture on abortion, I think is absolutely faulty. That there is still a contrast between the two. And what a lot of people have come out and said is that his posture on abortion is that he thinks that it should be left up to the states, and that he's not necessarily coming out with any particular position on it. What he wants to do, in the eyes of some commentators and pundits, what he wants to do is he wants to back away from the issue and say, okay, I'm not going to dictate this issue. I'm going to let the states decide, which means I'm going to let the people decide. Now, whether or not that's a valid approach is certainly something that we can discuss, because I did a Substack article probably a few years ago called "Abortion is a Federal Matter." Because the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, the federal Constitution, says no state shall deprive any person of life without due process. So I argue that abortion is a federal matter and cannot be left up to the states without violating the Constitution of the United States. But having said all that, the fact that he wants to back away and take a more of a hands-off approach and let the states decide is a far, far different posture than what Harris is taking, because Harris wants a national abortion policy that all states would be pretty much obligated to follow and would have to follow. And if they didn't follow it, then they would be in violation of federal law. So I believe that under Trump's presidency in the next 4 years, the murder of a great many unborn children is going to be prevented. That is something that I think, to me, that is reason enough to vote for Trump, because voting for Trump is the best way to stop Kamala Harris. And if that's the case, then it's the best way to stop the increase in the number of abortions that will most likely be performed if Harris had been elected.
Yeah, I mean, I won't push back. If she had won, she would have tried to make a federal mandate to undo what the Supreme Court had done. That's true.
Right. So number 2, the number of rapes and murders of U.S. citizens will decrease due to a more secure border. I firmly believe that's going to be true. I believe that lives are going to be saved because of the fact that our border will be more secure, and that fewer criminals are going to enter into the United States who and there we this is simply an incontrovertible fact that a great many rapes and murders have occurred at the hands of illegal border crossings. So if Trump can decrease illegal border crossings, and thereby decrease the amount of criminals that are coming into this country unvetted and unrestrained, then I believe that this crime statistic is going to decrease to a significant degree.
Yeah, so I work in counterterrorism, and I have a lot of Southwest border coworkers and stuff. It absolutely needed to be more secured than it was over the last 4 years. And so, yeah, and this is a big deal for Donald Trump, and as it would have been for Ron DeSantis or Mike
Right.
Pence. So I agree.
Yep. Absolutely.
Here's where again, where Trump went wrong is he was pitching a wall as magic. The cartels are beyond the wall, but there still needed to be more structural work. There could have been a lot of more technological and just a robust southwest border solution other than just the wall. Uh, I think I think probably Mike Pence and maybe Ron DeSantis could have said, "Hey, look, here's what the geography looks of the border between the U.S. and Mexico. You can't put a wall from Houston to San Diego because of just the sheer geography, the rivers, the mountains. But there are areas where we could be more robust. So, like one great big beautiful wall is something that's sort of naive, and granted, a lot of people who don't live around the southwest border would kind of believe that a simple answer. But it's more robust than that, and I think maybe there's other leaders who could have talked about a better solution than just a wall. But that being said, the left dropped the ball on that a lot, so that's not. Uh,
Yeah, and I'll just
be,
and
go ahead.
I'll just make two observations about that. First of all, I think people who were a little bit more politically astute would have seen the wall as simply one item on the list of a family of strategies
Yeah.
to secure the border. And Trump seemed to treat that as though it was the only item on the list. And
Right.
so yeah, that was rather one dimensional. But I think he's going to still push the wall. It's just that he's going to run into the limits of what is realistic just automatically. No one's going to have to tell him, because those realities are going to surface, and he's going to have to deal with them. And I think what's going to happen is, hopefully, his advisors are going to say, "Listen, buddy, your wall idea is great as far as it goes, but there has to be more to it than that."
Yes.
And my guess is, I think he'll be willing to listen. I think he did listen to his advisors in his first term. There were times when he rejected the advice of his advisors, and there are times when he accepted it. There are times when he got good advice. There are times when he got bad advice. So, all of the above, all of these things are going to be in play.
Right.
But that's a great point that you make, though, that you can't have a one-dimensional approach to it.
Right.
So my number 3 benefit of a Trump presidency: the influence of Marxism, communism, socialism will substantially diminish. Because one of the things that the left and the Democratic Party is pushing more strong than anything else is Marxism. And that's where critical theory is a factor, because critical theory is a part of neo-Marxism, the new cultural Marxism that began in the Frankfurt School in the early 1920s and has spread through all of our institutions, all of our educational institutions ever since, and it has cranked out Marxist after Marxist after Marxist. And so if you went to a liberal arts college in the United States between 1925 and the current and now, you're most likely going to be a Marxist, because people were being indoctrinated into Marxism in the colleges and universities, and therefore critical theory would have been the standard methodology for attacking Western principles. And if you stop the Democratic Party, you have a good chance of stopping that movement. And I think Trump is dead set against critical theory, dead set against Marxism and socialism. And so, if that's the case, I think the influence of those left wing ideologies are definitely going to decrease. And especially fascism, by the way. Fascism, communism, and socialism, those are the three, that's the unholy trinity of Marxist ideologies and Marxist regimes. And it's just absolutely ironic that people call Trump a fascist when he is one of the most anti-Marxist people on the planet. Now, we say he's not an ideologue, but that's not entirely true. Because in some ways, he is an ideologue. He's smart enough to know that Marxism is dangerous and detrimental to human society, and it results in the murder of millions and millions and millions of people. So I think that that's going to be a huge advantage for a Trump administration going forward here.
Yeah, and so my thought here on this is that it's human nature to sort of build authoritarian regimes. I think if we kind of if we're left alone to our own devices, we end up absorbing an authority figure or an authority concept, and then we just sort of defend that at all costs, and that can be very effective. So while it's true that Trump would be fighting the authoritarian Marxist regimes, he's also creates a danger of a Trump authority where he doesn't get checked. And so this is one of the big things that our founding fathers said, was that no matter who you are or what you call it, that can be checked. There's another authority that can check so that you don't go too far, that you don't build a movement where people just have to do whatever you say. That's the problem. And so I think one of the things that Trump presented that I don't think Mike Pence or Ron DeSantis would have presented is this willingness to be checked and to have other people to go, hey, to be able to be pulled aside and said, hey, you're going too far. Let's make sure that you have oversight. So the secret to our success is oversight. Trump has done a lot of damage to that with this Supreme Court thing saying that the president can do what he wants. We're lucky because the president right now could say, hey, I'm declaring martial law and I'm using the Supreme Court. It wouldn't work. The people of the U.S. would freak out, but it's now something that the president can do. And I think both Mike Pence and Ron DeSantis would have said, hey, we're not having this. This is not something that can be implemented. What worries me is when the Supreme Court and Congress all just say, hey, you tell us what to do, sir, and we'll do that. That's going to be a problem. And I worry, we'll see what Trump does with that. But it worries me that that's going to create another type of authority. And then who cares about Marxism? If we have another authority where we can't check him and we can't provide oversight to him, it's going to create a whole other problem.
Words to the wise. So my number 4 benefit is, I believe, child abuse in the form of genital mutilation of minors is going to drop. And I want to reiterate. You and I were talking in the green room about this a little bit. I want to reiterate that these are not absolute advantages. All of these things are going to be relative. I don't think that genital mutilation of minors is going to go away completely, but I think it's going to be reduced, because Trump has said that he wants to introduce legislation that will make it illegal to perform sex change operations on minors and so on. That this is child abuse, that it is absolutely child abuse, because you're taking someone who is not mature enough to make decisions about themselves that are going to last for the rest of their lives. And so it absolutely is child abuse to do that. And so I believe that that's going to drop. And if Trump makes good on his campaign promise to introduce legislation that will make that illegal, then the past pattern that I've seen of him keeping his campaign promises gives me a certain level of confidence that he will probably follow through on that. And I believe that most people would be in favor of that kind of legislation. So
Yeah. I think for this one, this was easy to agree with because there were several countries in Europe who embraced this for a while, and then they saw the outcome of it, and then they changed, they reversed it. And it was sort of like we did with the uh, what did we do in the 20s with the alcohol? I forget the word. When we outlawed it.
Prohibition.
Yeah. It'll be like that. There's a lot of countries in Europe that embraced this and ran with it, saw the outcome, and immediately reversed course. So I think this is
Yeah.
something that the more people look into it, left and right, with kids who have different views and not, they'll say, okay, this is not something we should be doing. You know, when someone's 10, to have them be making decisions like this, that when they're 20, they're going to look back and say, what happened?
Yeah. Yeah. And that is a tragedy. That's a huge tragedy. Number 5, I believe that inflation is going to roll back to a certain degree. I believe that prices will gradually go down, but this is a very tricky item. This is extremely tricky because one of the things that a lot of economists have pointed out is that you don't just reverse inflation overnight, and that it's almost impossible to reverse the effects of inflation once they have taken root in your economic spheres. So I think that there's going to be an improvement in inflation, and I think there's going to be an improvement in prices. There's going to be a little bit more competition, but the problem is that the criticism against the Democratic Party of overspending is a little bit like the pot calling the kettle black when Republicans criticized the Democrats for that, because Trump was still a big spender and he still had poor monetary policy. So I think this is going to be an advantage. I think it's going to be relieved to a certain degree. I think prices are going to get better. I think people are going to be able to afford to go to the grocery store better than they were before. But I don't think that the magnitude of the reduction and the improvement that I would like to see here is actually going to take place. I think it's going to be
Yeah.
an incremental improvement, and that's about it.
Yeah, and I won't really push back on this, except just that I think there's a whole bunch of factors, and one president can't necessarily change it. But I won't really push back.
Right.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, and we talked about Trump's ego, and Trump is all about, oh, I'm gonna make inflation go away, and I'm gonna make all this better. I'm gonna fix all this. Well, okay, I know that you're gonna try to fix all this, but your ego is a little bit on overstating the case here. You may be able to affect some improvements in a lot of these things, but you're not necessarily going to be able to just simply fix them, because some of these things are unfixable. I remember Thomas Sowell speaking at the University of Chicago in some of the symposiums about economics and economic policy. Yeah, and he said inflation is will always be with us. It's always going to be a reality, and you don't just make inflation go away. You certainly don't make it go away overnight, and you don't make it go away altogether, period, because it's always going to be the case. What you can do is slow it down,
Yeah.
and you can have better monetary policy. You don't flood the country with cash like this. And that's what government spending does. And so I think there's going to be less government spending under Trump, but it's not going to be less enough, if that's a proper way to put that.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. What he seems to be okay with spending if it's for something that he likes. The best thing he's got going for him is that after the fact, he can tell a different story, and a surprising number of people will repeat that story despite what happened.
Yeah.
And so that's maybe good for him. I don't know that it's good for everybody, and we'll see what plays out.
Yeah. All right, number 6, in my humble opinion, which is the opinion everybody should adopt, I believe that instability and unrest in the world is going to see a downward trend with Trump in office. And the reason that I say that is because I'm comparing what happened in the world and what happened with terrorism and what happened with regimes that were threatening nuclear holocaust and so on within between 2017 and 2020, I think there's a big contrast between what happened in the world during the Trump years of his first term and what is happening in the world now and what has happened in the last 4 years under Biden. But you have the expertise in terrorism and in politics on the world stage. And so I will give you the opportunity to push back on this and or to just simply add your insights on it because I highly covet your wisdom in this area. So
Okay. The first thing I want to start at is that all those cities that stopped prosecuting people who were shoplifting now have neighborhoods where you can't even have stores anymore. So there's stores that just stopped stocking their stores and just closed the stores because shoplifters would go in and take whatever they wanted, and it destroyed the neighborhood. And so wherever that happened, whether it was the city's fault or however you want to claim it, those cities ruin themselves and they'll have to rebuild. So I'm always big on a big law and order to keep shoplifters from just walking through the streets and taking what they want. I'm huge on that. And so I'm thinking maybe under this administration, they're definitely going to address that.
well, this by the way, real quickly, this item is mostly about foreign policy, but
Right, I know, but I wanted to start with that
but
because I think
yeah.
for me that's the biggest in terms of unrest and instability. I think that's our biggest problem. But yeah, I want to go to Israel and Russia next. I blame Israel for October 7th. I think they trusted Hamas, and I think they trusted their technology, and they didn't realize that the infrastructure underneath their technology, it was the weakness, and Hamas took advantage of that. And again, they treated Hamas like an ally, and Hamas took advantage of all that. And then Hamas destroyed themselves. What Hamas did on October 7th will forever be their undoing, and they're not going to just destroy themselves. They're going to lose a lot of their population and already have because of what they decided to do. And I'll never not blame Hamas for that. I'm just saying that Israel or the Israeli leadership were too trusting and allowed that to happen by not making sure the infrastructure underneath the technology was taken care of.
Okay.
So
Do you
whether that
think
happened,
do you think they know that, and do you think that they will
yeah,
avoid
yeah,
making
yeah,
that mistake again?
right, yeah, absolutely. They'll make the mistake. They'll never make that mistake again. And not only that, they've been meticulous, like with their dealing with Lebanon and Iran. Just recently, it's not classified to say that Israel absolutely. I have to be careful, but absolutely dealt with Iran in a meticulous way. When they did their airstrikes, I don't know how much it made the news, but they did some airstrikes about a week ago where they dismantled Iran's ability to even see that it was coming. Then they dismantled sites where Iran was building missiles. And then they publicly said, here's your infrastructure with oil and things like that in your energy sectors, which we could have dismantled tonight, and we didn't. You also don't have the ability to stop us from dismantling those tomorrow night, and we won't. But you do it again, you mess with us again, you don't have the ability to stop us from taking out this infrastructure any night that we want to. It's going to take you years to be able to stop us from doing this, and we'll graciously not do that. But you're done. That was brilliant. And so, yeah, I think Israel has learned a lot of lessons from this. But I think Hamas would have done that underneath any president. I don't blame any president for what Hamas did. I think Hamas was just suicidal and so ideological that they were willing to ruin themselves, and they did do that. And I hate that the Israeli families had to deal with that. And I think that.
Well, and think of the suffering that the Palestinians have endured in Gaza and in the West Bank. I mean, holy cow! That's been that. But Israel has said, guys, don't blame us. Blame Hamas. This is
Right.
this is their doing. We're
Right.
trying to be as precise as possible. But you need to blame Hamas because they're the ones that are using you for human targets. They're the ones that are hiding in the general population. And so the people in Gaza and the West Bank, they don't stand a chance when Hamas is taking that kind of a strategy.
Right. Not enough Palestinians have stood up and said what Hamas did to us. I know that we elected Hamas, but what Hamas did to us has destroyed us, and that's unforgivable. Not enough Palestinians are doing that. And then a surprising number of Democrats over here in the U.S. look at Hamas as if they're freedom fighters and as if Israel is a colonizer. And had Hamas not done that, Israel would have continued having better relationships with Gaza. They were letting more Palestinians in. And when Hamas did what they did on October 7th, they ruined themselves and the Palestinian people. And for all the liberals who say that Hamas are freedom fighters, if any group had come in and targeted your family and specifically looked for kids and then celebrated the murder of the kids, then you would be looking for blood. You would be looking for blood right now. And and if anyone was calling them freedom fighters after they did that to your family, that would be unforgivable to you. So I absolutely blame Hamas, and I don't blame the president for what Hamas did. And the only thing that I mean about Israel is that they had a vulnerability that they didn't check, and that also led to the problem. Which again, I think they've learned their lesson. But I just wanted to point out that that probably was going to unfold no matter who was president. And so, I don't blame the president for that.
Well, and I think Trump's pro-Israel posture and his criticism and condemnation of the anti-Israel kind of sewage that you see in much of the Democratic Party, a little bit in the Republican Party, but not much. Most of the anti-Israel posture that you see is embedded in the Democratic Party, and I think one of the biggest criticisms that the Democrats have against Trump is that he supports Israel to a larger degree than they think he should, but he's not going to take their anti-Israel posture and I don't think that the Democrats are ever going to let up on their criticism of how he considers Israel to be one of our greatest allies. And I don't think that anybody is going to say that Israel's perfect in order to say we need to support Israel, and Israel did not deserve the attacks that Hamas inflicted on them.
Right. Yeah. No matter what anyone says, and I'm not a big fan of Dennis Prager, but I agree with something that he said, which is that if the Palestinians stop fighting, then this would all go away. If there was they just stop fighting, and then they could negotiate. I'm not the one to say that the West Bank and Gaza have the best deal going forward. And there's all kinds of past history that you could argue with me, and I won't fight back. I'm just saying that what they're doing, the suicidal strategies of Hamas is working to absolutely annihilate Hamas off the map and the Palestinian people. So it's absolutely the worst choice that they could have ever made. It's the most disastrous things they could have done. And I think more Palestinians need to be speaking like that. And then more people here on the left need to be able to say, what Hamas did was just unbelievable to me, and there's nothing heroic about it, and it's just all disgusting. That should be a universal theme across America.
Yeah. Yeah, and finally, this accusation of genocide against Israel is just absolutely it needs people need to understand that how unbelievably ridiculous that is.
And if Hamas had done that,
Israel has done.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, what Israel has done has been purely defensive. In my view, I don't think that Israel has done anything aggressive in this situation. Now, they have launched attacks, but those attacks were retaliatory. They were not any kind of spontaneous aggression against the Palestinian people. And people need to understand that. So it's not genocide when you're defending yourself.
Right, and then if Hamas had somehow worked a deal with the cartels and come across our border and had gone home to home, well, first of all, they would have had a different reception, especially in the southwest border. But just say they somehow got across the border and went home to home, targeting families. All those families, and say they're families on the left, they would be saying, "I don't care what happens. We need to absolutely make sure this never happens again," which is what Israel's doing.
Right. I think that number 7, I think the weaponization of the Department of Justice has a good chance of coming to an end under Trump, because I don't. Now, I could be naive about this. I saw that little smirk on your face. I don't believe that Trump is in favor of or would endorse weaponizing the Department of Justice. I don't think he's going to go after the people who instituted this lawfare against him. I don't think he's going to go after them. I don't think he's going to take revenge. I could be naive, but when he says my revenge is going to be success, I believe him for now.
Yeah.
For
If Trump takes the high road, I'm going to spend a lot of the next 4 years going, man, I really misjudged how he was going to be. So I'll be so pleased if that's how it is. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, but that's another point of track record recognition, because people were weaponizing law enforcement against Trump, and they were weaponizing all sorts of devices in his first term. They impeached him, and they brought charges against him for various things, and I didn't see him retaliate and respond in the same manner back then, which leads me to believe that he probably won't do the same thing this time as well. I think he'll take the high road. Now,
I hope so. I would just say I hope so.
Yeah. Well, and isn't that pretty much all we can do anyway? I mean, for all these things, all we can do is hope that a Trump presidency is going to be what we hope it's going to be, and what we think it's going to be, and what we want it to be. So it's always a matter of I hope so, and we'll have to wait and see. So,
Sure.
yeah, I think that would be the case even with DeSantis or with Pence. So.
Well, yeah, and I'll just say with Pence and DeSantis, it wouldn't have been an issue, because whenever there was something that could have been problematic for the law, I think Pence and DeSantis would have said, "Hey, we're not going to do it that way." And if someone was investigating them, they would have lawyers who would say, "Keep your mouth shut, let the investigation run its course, and you keep the high road without freaking out, and don't make it worse." And they would have taken that advice.
Well, my only pushback against that would be I'm not convinced that would have slowed down the attacks on a DeSantis or on a Pence, because the left is going to attack people just because they're a threat to socialism.
Right.
Period.
That's true. But
yeah.
but like for instance, when under the Mueller thing, it never would have happened. But because even if there was the campaign manager who was talking to the Russians, and it was underneath, say, Pence, when the lawyer said, "Don't try to stop the investigation," Pence would have not tried to stop the investigation. And that's what it was Trump trying to stop the investigation that made even conservatives and independents say, "Well, what are we going to do about this?" Which would just not even be an issue. The accusations only have so much weight. It's if you respond poorly to the accusations, where you can give fuel to your enemy. And I think Trump gave a lot of fuel to the enemy. and I think he will. I think he'll keep giving fuel to the enemy. We'll see. I hope he's learned some lessons.
Well, one of the things that we just have to accept about this is it is Donald Trump, and Trump's going to be Trump.
Yep.
So again, we just have to fasten our seatbelts, but I believe though that these benefits that I'm outlining, I believe that they outweigh the bad behavior that Trump will probably exhibit, and I'm sure he will. And Trump is going to be Trump, and so I'm not naive enough to think that he's not going to be Trump, because because Trump is Trump, and he always will be. So if he makes mistakes like that, I'm going to call him out, and I'll criticize him for it, and I will disapprove of it. But I'm not going to regret voting for him because of anything that he does in terms of this bad behavior and things like that. Because one of the things that I said in 2016 was that Trump will chop off some of the fingers of our freedom and our founding principles, but Hillary would have gone after its vital organs. So there's a huge, huge difference between those two.
Yeah, one of the themes that I'll be pushing for the next 4 years is that I'm not preaching to Christians they shouldn't have voted for Trump. I'm preaching to Christians that in 2020, everybody didn't get together and say top priority, replace Trump. And I think in the next 4 years there might even be a lot of Christians who say we should have done that. We'll see.
Well, there's an even deeper issue that I've been actually crowing about for quite a while now, and that is that 40 million Christians simply don't vote at all.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a bigger question, that's a bigger issue and a bigger problem than whether they should have replaced Trump in 2020 as their right. nominee. So
right now, for both parties, excitement is what decides the primaries, and that's a problem. And so I think both parties need to address that.
Yeah, but we also I'm going to take this off the screen for now for a second, because we also have to pay attention to the issue of electability, because there's trying to nominate the ideal candidate, and then there's trying to nominate the electable candidate, and the ideal candidate and the electable candidate are not always the same person.
Right.
And I would rather nominate someone who is electable but problematic than nominate someone who's ideal but doesn't have any chance of winning the election. Yep. You know, in a sense, politics is a game. We hate that reality, but it's a reality that we have to deal with. We have to play the game we have to play the game to win. If we don't, and we do that in a way that we don't compromise our principles, but we still have to recognize that we have to play the game. And one of the people who has recognized this and who has commented about this more eloquently than anybody else, I think, is Dinesh D'Souza. Because he's saying, I'm going to support Trump in 2016 because Trump is the guy who's going to be able to beat Clinton. And he's the guy that's going to be able to slow down our slide into totalitarianism. And I agree with that. I think if we were to waste time trying to find the ideal candidate, I think what's going to happen is the world's going to burn around us. You don't paint the porch while the house is burning. So, all right.
I would just say totalitarianism is definitely what we want to avoid. So hold that thought.
All right. Yeah, I think I can predict what you're going to say about that.
That's I can leave it there. I think everybody knows what I mean by that.
Number 8, First and Second Amendment rights, I think, are going to be preserved. They have a greater likelihood.
Freedom of speech and the ability to keep a gun.
Freedom of speech and the ability to protect those you love, to protect your life, your property, your family. I think that the First and Second Amendments have been under fierce attack under the Biden-Harris administration, and that trend would continue. And so we would be in grave danger of losing those First and Second Amendment rights. And by the way, all the rest of the Bill of Rights rest on the foundation of the First and Second Amendments. If you take away the First and Second Amendment, then you can kiss the rest of the amendments goodbye. You can kiss the whole Bill of Rights goodbye.
I agree with that.
The First and Second Amendments are what keep the rest of them intact. So,
yeah, my biggest theme is we got to protect oversight for everybody, and those first two amendments are essential for making sure we have oversight over every single person.
Yep. Number 9, I believe more jobs are going to be created due to tax and regulation decreases. So tax decreases and regulation decreases are the one that those two things are two of the most effective ways that Trump has actually been successful, because he wants to unleash the power of the economy and let it thrive and let it prosper. And he knows, even though he's not an ideologue, he knows very well that excessive taxes and regulation will stifle economic activity and economic prosperity. And so he wants to remove those barriers. And what did you see under the Biden-Harris administration? You saw increased taxes, you saw unbelievable amounts of regulations. And look at the state of the economy. Now, I don't care whether, I mean, Kareem Jean-Pierre can sit there and tell us that that we have a booming economy all day long. She can say that until she's blue in the face. And I'm going to call that baloney. We don't have a strong economy right now. We have a weakened economy, and you tell somebody who just made a trip to the grocery store and had to choose between two essential items and couldn't get both, try to tell them that the economy is in good shape. It's just laughable. So I think that more jobs are going to be created, and I think that economic prosperity is going to increase. And by the way, as a Christian, I am going to endorse and approve of economic prosperity, not because I'm a materialist and not because I worship money and not because I want to have all these nice things and I want everybody to be able to take a vacation in Mexico every year. The reason that I want economic prosperity is because that enables families to take care of their children, to feed their children, and to stay in their homes and to be able to raise their families in a way where they can have some sense of stability. So I think economic prosperity is a good thing. I think it's something that Christians should endorse as part of loving their neighbor. So, and whenever you fight for your own rights, you're fighting for everybody's rights. And so I think this is true. This is very strongly true in the area of jobs and economic prosperity and so on. So,
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you.
wow. Number 10, energy independence. I am a strong believer in energy independence, and that's probably no surprise knowing that I am a conservative Christian, but conservative being the operative word there in terms of our energy policy. I think the drill baby drill not moniker but slogan, I think is powerful. I think it's absolutely critical, because if we are strong in energy in the United States, then that's going to make our entire economy strong. Our economy is basically built on energy. So if we are dependent on foreign oil, foreign sources of energy, foreign natural gas, then I think that makes us a slave, and it makes us at the mercy of the rest of the world, and the rest of the world does not have our best interests in mind. Obviously, it doesn't have the best interests of the American people in mind. So that's a big
Yeah,
one for me.
yeah. I'm big on energy independence too, and I'll add something that I think is like a utopia. I think there's probably some amazing discoveries left in solar, in which case I say let Elon Musk work. As much as I think that the way the left attacked Elon Musk and kind of drove him into Trumpism, okay, they lost that, but the man can make a rocket fly backwards. I know he can't, but he set up the situation where scientists learned how to make a rocket fly backwards. So let him work on solar. We have a lot of sunlight. Let's capture that. Let's put it to work. Let's find out the technology. And then even if there is a limited amount of oil, solar is the future. Let Elon Musk work, and Trump is planning on letting him work. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. But I think also Trump is going to roll back the EV mandate, and I think that has to happen, because I mean, Elon Musk is the EV guy. I mean, he's out there. He's got all these hybrid vehicles and all these electric vehicles, all these Teslas, and they have a place. They certainly have a place. But to simply say we're going to eliminate fossil fuels and eliminate fossil fuel burning vehicles is just it is so unrealistic, and I question the intellectual capacity of anyone who's going to swallow that kind of nonsense. So fine, let's work on solar and let's work on other energy sources, but we need to make sure that we don't cut our nose off in spite of our face and shoot ourselves in the foot by just saying, okay, we're going to get rid of fossil fuels. I don't think you'll ever get rid of fossil fuels. And I don't think you'll ever get rid of fossil fuel burning vehicles. You may be able to reduce their role in transportation, but you're never going to eliminate it. And just like you're never going to make it so that EVs are the 100% are going to be the only kinds of vehicles that people drive. And especially in the city. If people are commuting in the suburbs or in large cities and they don't take long trips and don't take long vacations and so on, then great, have them, and if they can afford it, because electric vehicles are unbelievably expensive compared to gas-powered vehicles. So yeah, fine. If people want to buy an EV, great, let them buy an EV. More power to you if you can afford it. And if you want to install this kind of technology in your garage to be able to recharge your, I saw the expense of that one time, not too long ago, the cost of owning an electric vehicle and recharging it and having the facilities in your home to be able to recharge that vehicle. It was just absolutely astounding. But if people can afford it, then great, let them do it. But give people the freedom. That this is what a lot of this is about, and I think this is what a lot of this is about for Trump. I think Trump wants to say, guys, let freedom be the answer to a lot of these issues. Because if someone wants to go in this direction, let them go in that direction if they want to. Just don't let them tell everybody that they have to go in that direction as well. That everybody has to go in that direction. That it's just kind of silly. So.
Before we go, there's like 3 or 4 warning signs I would want to give all the Trump fans.
That's what I've been waiting for.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say is watch out for worshiping people. That's going to be dangerous. And that's something that Christian conservatives used to talk about, especially during the Obama phase. Christian conservatives were like, you know what, we sort of fell into this with Reagan, and it presented a problem to us, and it came back to bite us. And so when everybody was so excited for Obama, a whole bunch of Christian conservatives were like, hey, I get it. Just watch worshiping people. It's not a good idea. And those were Christian evangelicals who are like, do not worship a person. It messes with your head. It's just not good for us. A lot of those people now worship Trump. I understand that plenty of people say he's a buffoon, but we're going to trust him over the left. Great. That's perfectly fine with me. There are people who worship Trump. There's books that he's the son of God. 10% maybe. Just watch it. So watch out for that. Yeah. The next thing.
Well, real quick, before we go on to your next thing, I want to make a comment on that. There's another factor involved in this, and that is that there has been such a backlash against Trump worship that people have fallen off the opposite side of the cliff.
Oh yeah, like Trump hate no matter what.
They want to avoid Trump worship so much that they say we're going to refuse to vote for him for moral reasons. I'm not going to vote for a sinner like this. I'm not going to vote for somebody who does not represent my Christian beliefs and doesn't represent the gospel, and in fact is antagonistic and probably has antipathy toward a lot of our gospel principles. And so we're not going to vote for him for moral reasons. And what I have told people over and over again, and people just simply don't understand this, and it drives me up the wall. So this is one of my biggest pet peeves. You don't vote for a candidate because of his moral character. You vote for a candidate because of the moral consequences of their policies. And what people are doing is they're saying, I don't want to vote for Trump because he's a bad guy, orange man bad, so I'm not going to vote for him. I'm going to refuse to vote for him, and I'm being pleasing to God because I'm not voting for this sinner out there. But what they don't understand is that if they don't vote for Trump, they're going to increase the chance that Harris is going to win the election, which she didn't. Thank God that she didn't. But
Right.
no
It's
thanks
over.
to a lot of these Christians.
Right. He's already won.
But
So
right,
you don't have to you don't have to worry because he won.
okay, but this principle still needs to be understood because this is
Yeah,
not going to be the last election out there.
that's true.
And so people need to learn that you don't vote for a candidate on the basis of their moral character. I would love it if the president that I voted for had high moral character, had an impeccable moral character. I'd love it if he did. But we just simply don't have that luxury. And so what happens is people are refusing to vote for Trump for moral reasons, and they're increasing. They by refusing to vote for him, they increased the chances that Kamala would have won, and the moral atrocities that would have ensued from a Harris administration would be far more evil than any of the moral flaws that any individual person might have. So if you don't vote for Trump, you're increasing the chances that Kamala could get elected. If Kamala was elected, then more people are going to die, more unborn children are going to die, more people are going to have their genitals mutilated, more people are going to die because of the illegals that are crossing the border and attacking and raping and murdering people in the United States. And so those are moral evils that we have the power to increase the chances that we can stop. And if that's the case, that is the kind of moral decision that we need to make. And I would love it if Trump was an angel. I would love it if he was just Jesus Christ incarnate. That would be
Or
wonderful.
just a disciplined conservative. You don't have to be an angel. Just a
Sure.
disciplined
What?
conservative.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
look,
I'd love it. I would love it. But
yeah.
we just don't have that option. And what we have to do is we have to go with the option that's going to restrain the greatest amount of evil. And if that's the case, that's our responsibility. And that is the moral dimension of voting. It's not in the moral character of the candidate.
Okay, so a couple of things. First of all, there's too much Trump hate. There are people who hate him no matter what. There's no good he can do in their minds. They're always going to hate him, and that's a shame. But then there's also the people who worship him no matter what, and that's also equally a shame. So I
Yep.
put that on you guys so that when you meet somebody who's like God sent, can't do wrong, that you guys help them and say, hey, let's sit down, let's talk for a little bit. Try to bring them back from that ledge. And then
Right.
Yep. Meanwhile, the people who think that he's a buffoon, when they meet someone who says, well, he could do no wrong, we pull them aside and say, well, if he does something good, let's give him credit for when he does something good. So we
Right.
can all help try to pull people back from those two ledges.
Exactly.
And then the big thing is when I look at the Christians who say, I'm not going to vote for him no matter what, and then the Christians who say, well, we have to, even though he's immoral, those two camps, the reason why they're fighting is because of one man. One man has put them in that situation. You take that one man away, those two come together. And so to 2024, too late. Can't do anything about it. But going forward in the future, next time there's someone who says, well, yeah, I'm with those guys. Well, what are they about? Doesn't matter. I'm with them. They're me. I'm them. I'll say they do what I say. All Christians should at that point go, whoa, 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 whoa. We've been in this situation. He put us in a decade of madness. One man put us in this decade of madness that we didn't have to be in. If we had said back in 2015, hey, go sit down. We got Ted Cruz. Thanks anyway. But thanks for talking. Had all Christians united around Ted Cruz, none of this would have happened. So just throw that out there.
Well, it's true that one man gave us this chaos, but we also have to recognize that one man did something that was absolutely critical and was absolutely necessary. So I have an article on my Substack page called Trumpotherapy, and the article is about chemotherapy. When a cancer patient has some serious cancer, and one of the treatment options is chemotherapy. Chemotherapy is brutal. I have a daughter who has suffered from inflammatory breast cancer for the past several years. And she went through chemotherapy and she went through radiation, and that chemotherapy treatment was absolutely brutal. It was a nightmare. But it was her hope it was the hope of saving her life. And so I wrote this article called Trumpotherapy, and I said Trump is nasty, Trump is distasteful. We don't like the things that he says. We don't like a lot of things about him. But on the other hand, if he's what it takes to stop the cancer in our country, then I'll take Trump. And sure, in the future, let's try to find somebody better. That's absolutely the case. I completely agree with that.
The next time someone comes up and attempts to do what Trump does, he'll have a dead giveaway because he won't understand your stuff and he won't be interested in that. He'll just say, I want your support and I'm you and you're me. And if you disagree, I'm going to call you that you're not one of you and say that you have to agree with me to be one of you. It's a dead giveaway and it's immediate. And all Christians should be like, whoa, 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 whoa. We know what you did last time and we're not ever going to go through that again. That's the message I want to send is the warning signs now and you know what happens if you don't act on it immediately.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say loyalty at all costs is a problem. So if you have any candidate who's saying, hey, be loyal to me or I'm going to get rid of you, no matter what I do, you just be loyal to me. That's what leads to person worship. So that's something that conservative Christians should be watching out for. And then my final thing, I've got two more things. Strength of character matters. If you don't have strength of character, then you might start panicking. Then you might lose your values. If you don't know what you're about, then in hard times, you're going to fall back on panic and then people are going to watch you and that's going to turn them off to you. And then the fourth thing, I voted for Kamala Harris for one reason only. I was a single issue candidate because I knew if she lost, she would go home, she would scream at her pillow, and then she'd get up the next day and concede. And I know for a fact that Donald Trump will never concede. Now, he won, who cares? But had he not won, we would be dealing with him not conceding right now, and he would never concede. And that's who he is, and that's a bad problem for Christians and conservatives. That's something you need to watch out for, is someone who will not take a hit. That's terrifying. And so I voted her for that one reason. And so you can judge me for postmodernism and post-Marxism and leftist agenda, because I understood all that, and I still said she'll quit. And she will quit. And on January the 6th, there's going to be Congress people who will stand up and go, we can't have this. He's a Nazi. He's a fascist. She's going to grab her gavel. She's going to stand up and she's going to say, shut up and sit down, kids. This is our system. She's going to bang her gavel and confirm Donald Trump, which would have never happened with Trump. And so we're lucky that we had this post-Marxist nightmare satanic person who at least was an adult. And next time, make sure you get an adult, because somebody who doesn't quit, that's extremely dangerous. And that's a very patriotic, conservative problem that you should be looking out for.
Well, I'll have to say I disagree.
Well, he showed us that he wouldn't quit, and he never did.
Well, no, actually that is not necessarily true, because there was some extenuating circumstances that occurred during the 2020 election that I think altered the formula. There were a great many people who were convinced that the 2020 election was rigged and that it was interfered with. And if that's the case, if an election is rigged, the American people and the president have a right to question it. And I don't think it's the case. I don't think it's the case that Trump refused to concede, because what did he do when there was the transfer of power?
He was embarrassed and cornered into leaving. And he never said, okay, I quit. He just left. And then he said it was cheated, and he kept the cheating going until 2022. Only then did he drop it and start the 2024 campaign. And Here's the thing. If you're the president, you're the president, and people say, hey, there might be cheating, ask questions, you file your lawsuits, and then when your Department of Justice, whoever Bill Barr was, say, hey, we've looked into it, it's done, what would you have done? You feel bad.
Yeah, and
you've looked into it.
And Ted Cruz made an extremely strong point. He made it a point to say, no one was refusing to accept the results of the election. All they were asking for was to delay the certification until we could verify that the election was not rigged. That was the absolute agenda of the
Well,
people who were calling for that delay, and were simply saying, guys, we need to make sure this was a free and fair election. It is not unreasonable to ask that question. It's not unreasonable to wait until we can get confirmation that this thing wasn't rigged. And if I was a president and I lost in an election and I had reasonable evidence that the
wait,
election
hold
was
on.
rigged.
You filed all your lawsuits. You lost them all, and your Bill Barr said, "Hey, sir, it's done." What would you do?
Yeah,
You, Phil Barr.
you were at the mercy of a Justice Department that was
Okay,
still
but
largely appointed by Obama and was largely corrupt.
but it
And
happened.
so
It happened.
if
What
you
would you
have
do? What would you, Phil Bear, do under those circumstances?
well, I don't know what I would do. It would depend on the circumstances, but here's the problem. And this is the problem that a lot of people have been making a lot of noise out of ever since, and very few people are listening to them. The problem is that we have a justice system that is now corrupt. And so when
But
you rely on
the justice system told him it's over.
right,
His
a
own
corrupt,
under his own.
a,
It was the Trump justice system. So the Trump justice system
the,
said, "Hey, sir, we looked into it. It's done."
it was not a completely Trump justice system. There were tons and tons of Obama appointees in that justice system, and that justice system, I can guarantee you, it was and is corrupt.
Well,
And
here,
if
how about
that's
this?
the
How about this?
case,
Hold on. About that, this corrupt justice system underneath the Biden Kamala administration, what did they do when the election came out on Tuesday night? What did this corrupt justice system do? They
well,
started
I don't
packing
think,
their bags because they lost. They started packing their bags because they lost.
yeah,
Those guys who allegedly cheated in 2020 are packing their bags and ready to go home because they lost the election.
that's true.
Okay.
But this election was not the same as the last election. That's all that I would probably offer about that.
Okay.
Because they knew that it would be political suicide to try to question the results of the election, and
It doesn't matter
and
if they're corrupt. Who cares? They could just do whatever they want because they're corrupt.
well, even corrupt people know when they don't have a chance of succeeding at whatever plans that they want to try to carry out. So
We'll say that we'll say they cheated, and then the voters all came back and revolutionized the world, and the cheaters like, okay, we got to quit. Now we're going to go home. We'll say that.
well, here's
But
the
it
other
could
thing
also
that
be,
we
I just want to say it's also possible that a whole bunch of people in 2020 were like, hey, we're done with this Trump guy. And so they voted against him, 81 million strong. And then over the next 4 years, 14, 15, 20 million of those people said, you know what? We're done with Biden, even if it means Trump. And so fewer people came out to support not Trump. More people came out to support Trump. The Trump platform actually became better than it was back in 2022. And so Trump won over not Trump, and it wasn't rigged. Trump just won this time.
well, here's one of the things that is true about this election that was not true about the last election. There were not states that were refusing to follow their own campaign laws, but there were states, especially battleground states in the 2020 election, that refused to follow their own campaign laws, their own campaign regulations. And so that opened the door to a lot of corruption and a lot of fraud in that election. In this election that we just had a couple days ago, we did not have battleground states that were refusing to follow their own campaign legislation. And if that's the case, then I don't care how corrupt your justice system might be, they're going to know that they don't have a leg to stand on because everybody knows that those states did follow their legislation properly. And by the way, one of the things that I enjoyed about this election, I mean, I'm glad that Trump won. I'm glad that the Democrats were stopped because it's a demonic agenda and it had to be stopped. But the other thing that I was pleased about was that I knew the result of the election before I went to sleep that night. And
Well,
that was a
it was
huge,
because more people voted for Trump than not Trump, in such numbers that it was clear.
I think it was because people were counting the way they were supposed to be counting. There was so much counting incompetence and refusal to count in such a way that we should have been able to, we should have known the results of that 2020 election before we went to bed that night, and we didn't. And there's a reason for that. And so that this you can't compare this election to the last election. And so if Kamala Harris had reason to believe that this election was rigged in favor of Donald Trump, I do not believe for a second that she would have conceded so easily.
I tell you,
I don't believe that for a second.
if she hadn't, then I would have had to stand up and tell everybody, "Hey, I voted for her for one reason, and now she's violating that, and I was wrong." But I firmly believe that she would quit because here's the truth about the election. We have 50 messed up versions, and there's no federalized system, and there can't be. Our Constitution demands that each state come up with their own thing. As flawed as it is, there's 50 flawed systems, and it's got to be that way constitutionally. And so if there's a whole bunch of people who say this is what we want, then it's going to be over quickly, which is what happened in 2024 and 2016. Sometimes it's not.
And
Like
that's one thing that
in 2000, it wasn't as simple. It was very, very close in 2000. It took months to figure out who won. But in this case, it was very, very clear. And so those flawed systems were still enough to capture the important metrics, and they could close it out that night. But it's not always going to be that way.
but at least they were following them. But and here's something that I think that you and I are definitely going to be on the same page on, and that is that I heard someone who was a surrogate for Trump say something about having federally controlled elections in the future.
That's bad.
And that raised a huge red flag for me.
Yep.
You have to keep the elections under the control of the states.
Yep.
Because it's not really the people who elect the president, it's the states that elect the president.
Yep.
And then the people vote on what president the state is going to vote on. Yep. So that's what the whole electoral college is all about.
I agree. And governors shouldn't be loyal to the president. Every governor, if a president pressures them, every governor should hang up the phone or call their lawyer, right?
And yes, and
Okay.
and I hope that if they try to introduce that measure, I hope and pray that it is defeated.
I agree.
Because if you nationalize elections, I think it's going to be all over. I think you're going to have a huge problem. Now, there is a little bit of a caveat, and I wanted to ask you about that, and then we can wrap up here pretty soon. But there is a caveat to that, and that is that it would absolutely be a disaster if you federalized the state elections,
Yeah.
the elections of senators, the elections of governors, and so on in the states.
Right.
But if you only federalized the elections that were for the representatives of the federal government, like the president and so on, would it be okay to nationalize those regulations, but not the ones that are electing officials that are confined to each individual state?
I honestly think every state should be still responsible for it because the whole point of this is that this enterprise is that there's oversight. I just think that each state needs to have a better, transparent system that can be easily recounted. Like Arizona completely rebuilt their system, which is why they still haven't announced, because they completely revamped. It was a Republican, by the way, who did that. So Arizona completely revamped it so that if they did have to recount, it could be meticulously recounted. It would take longer, but it's a very, very strict system so that you're counting ballots much more slowly. But they wanted it to be verifiable. So I think every state just has to work on it. It's a shame, but it's just the way it is. But
well, that was one of the. I think that was one of the biggest frustrations on the part of conservatives in the 2020 election was that they were looking at those states and they were saying those guys are not following their own rules, and no one is doing a damn thing about it. That was one of the
Well,
things that angered a lot of the conservatives in the 2020 election.
well, it just also Trump will never concede. He's just not that kind of guy, and that's a problem.
Okay,
That should
well
always be a problem.
that's where you and I disagree. I think he didn't concede. I don't think he refused to concede because he's not the kind of guy who would concede.
We'll
I
see.
think it
If
was
he
for a
ever
different reason.
if he ever does admit loss, then I'll be the first to apologize. He never will, though. But I want to ask you this: if you're the president of the United States, you're waiting for Georgia, you're 11,000 votes down, and one of your advisors says, "Hey, sir, let's call the Secretary of State in Georgia," and you talk to him for a while. How quickly would you fire that person, or would you start shouting at him and telling him that's the most inappropriate suggestion he's ever made? How quickly would you do that?
Yeah, that's there's no question about it. And
Okay,
and
good.
the only thing I disagree with you about is that I disagree with the proposition that Trump is not the kind of guy who will ever concede an election. I
We'll
just don't
see.
think that's true.
We'll
I
see.
think that the only data we have is data that is contaminated with a lot of extenuating circumstances and a lot of factors that have a huge impact on it. Real quickly, Josh Klein says, just jumping on to say that I think it's fine to say Trump was convinced by lawyers of a spurious legal theory and that I wouldn't have made the choice he did, but if he was genuinely convinced by said lawyer's theory, he might seek to try to delay the certification. Now, I think that was dumb and he was wrong, but it certainly doesn't rise to the level of destroying democracy.
And
So
I also want to
I
add that
think that makes a lot of sense.
Josh Klein, I'm a friend of Josh. Josh also called that whole thing gross. So I want to add that word. Even Josh said that was gross. So he says, hey, Trump was confused, and that's generous. I have a worse view of Trump's character, and you're right. Maybe he'll never have a way to show me.
Yeah.
However, I also have my, I was a Marine, and I'm really big about the system and the fact that we need a leader. And if I was in that situation, even if I had 1,000 millions of adoring fans, I would get up and say, "Hey guys, it's more important that we have a system going. I can't I can't be responsible for us to be fractured over this. Even if I do think there's corruption, it was so close that it's not worth me starting this fight. It's better for me to be the adult." And I
Hmm.
really was looking for, and I'm always looking for a leader who can step up and do that.
Well, the other thing that I've always thought about, and that I think we need to kind of balance this conversation out with, is that if there ever is election fraud, we don't have a whole lot of mechanisms in place that give us recourse if that were to happen. And
Right.
so we can call that gross, but the problem is that if we ever do have an election that is not a valid election and that is rigged, if that ever happens, we have no way of dealing with that problem.
That's true.
That's the
Hillary said the
thing.
same thing. Hillary said the same thing. There's no mechanism. She didn't know of a way to deal with it because she didn't want to accept it either, but she had no mechanism, so she conceded. Now here's the thing. So you're the president. You're President Phil. There's been that close election. People are like, hey, maybe they cheated, so you have reason to doubt. How do you address the American people? Do you get up and say they cheated, they cheated, they cheated, they cheated, they cheated, or do you say, hey guys, we're not sure. Let us ask questions. Which approach do you take?
I would take a third approach. I would say if they cheated, you have a right to know.
Yeah.
And if they cheated, you have a right to protest.
Right.
But if you do protest, protest peacefully.
Good.
That's
And
what I would do.
and if someone goes, "Hey,
And
get
and
on,"
and, and Richard,
uh,
I think that's what Trump did
uh, well,
because he said he believed that it was rigged,
mhm.
and he said that you have a right to protest, and he
Yeah,
specifically said, "Be peaceful.
right.
Do not commit violence."
Right. So I'm not arguing about the peaceful. I'm saying that whenever he got in front of the camera, his bottom line was that they cheated. That was his approach. Always that they cheated,
Yeah.
and that was a missed opportunity for him to show the wisdom that you just showed. And
Well,
that was
like I
extremely
said,
dangerous. It could have gone really, really badly because his bottom line was they cheated, they cheated, they cheated. It was baby minded and it was dangerous. And
well, like I
had
said,
and had Biden done that the other night, you would be right there with me, going, "Oh my God, we can't have that."
Trump will be Trump,
I know.
and and if an
That's my warning.
election, you know, a cheated, a corrupt, fraudulent election is one of the worst disasters that could ever befall this country. If
Yeah.
we don't have free and fair elections, it's all over.
And
And so,
we now know that we don't, because the people who said they cheated, they cheated, they cheated are packing their bags after they lost the election. So now we know that's done. Because I tell you
the
what,
people, the
if I was corrupt, if I stole power from Trump
you mean
in
the
2020, and then Biden was in charge, and I helped Biden, I guarantee you I wouldn't lose 2024. The 2024 elections would show that Harris won by 90%. Every state, 90% Harris. If I'm cheating, I would never ever relieve myself of power. I would always have it for the rest of my life.
oh,
If I was corrupt,
I don't think you'd be that stupid. I don't think you'd say
I would.
that your person won by 90% because
I
that
would.
wouldn't have been believable.
I would have done it. I would have done it, and then I would have dared people to deny it, and then I would have called them a non-patriot.
So
If I cheated,
you're saying that people who were accused of cheating in 2020 are now packing their bags.
right?
Is
Because
that what you're saying?
they yeah, because if allegedly if they cheated, they're now saying, okay, well, we forgot to cheat this time, so we're going to go home and wait to be prosecuted. And I've always said, if you think somebody cheated, investigate. Do an investigation and see what you come up with. But
Well, but
they
if
did.
if I was the kind of person who was corrupt enough to want to cheat,
Mhm.
I would still not cheat if I knew that the loopholes had been closed. If I knew that those procedures had been corrected, if those problems had been corrected. So if I knew that I wouldn't have any loopholes or if I wouldn't have any opportunity to cheat, then I wouldn't try to cheat because I would know that I don't have an opportunity. I might have motive, but I don't have opportunity, so I'm not going to commit the crime. That doesn't mean that I'm not the kind of person who's going to cheat, and that doesn't mean that we should say that those people who are packing their bags are somehow noble simply because they didn't have the
Well,
opportunity to do what they
they're
wish they could have done.
they're not noble. They're adults. They took the hit. And here's my thing. If they had the power to take the election when they weren't in power, and then they had 4 years to prepare to 2024, there's no loophole. There's no patriotic movement. There's no oversight. For 4 years, guaranteed win, no problems, because they've been in charge for 4 years. They're going to make sure that it's rigged to such an extent that there's no question about it, and they're going to keep winning, which is what Russia does, which is what all the countries who have rigged elections, they do it every year. Every time there's a country with a power person who's never going to leave, like Iran, they win by 90% every time, which is what would have happened when we do have a rigged elections, the winner's going to win by 90%.
Well, but that's a situation where they know that no one's going to be able to do anything about it. So
We've
they
already
don't
done that.
have to be they don't have to be realistic. I think in the United States, I don't think that's the same. I don't think we have the same situation in the U.S. I don't think we have reached the point where someone could cheat in such a way that was so incredibly outrageous that everyone knows that there's cheating going on, but no one can do anything about it. If that's the case, then I think that would be true. So,
I'm
but
willing
in the
to say
United
that.
States, you're not going to get somebody cheating in the United States that's going to go out and say we won by 90% of the vote.
Well, here's what I'll concede: it's possible that here and there could have been cheating and they just got away with it, despite the investigations that didn't find that. And now that you guys have won, search that out. Do everything you can to try and find out, was that 81 million, was that cheaters, or was that just people who are dissatisfied with Trump? I think it's statistically more likely that it was people who are just unhappy with Trump who've now changed their minds.
Well, whatever we do in any case like this, whenever any kind of suspicion arises,
Mhm.
we always need to make sure that we simply rely on evidence. We can't
Yes.
rely on speculation.
Rely on
And
evidence and rely on evidence. And then when you're addressing the people, do not say they cheated, they cheated, they cheated, they cheated, because that makes you look suspicious. Because here's the thing: let's say that the Democrats cheated, and they said, you know what, Trump's going to act like a baby, and because he acts like a baby, nobody's going to believe him, which is what happened.
yeah.
So they won. The cheaters
were
won
you
because
were you surprised that Trump acted like a baby?
no, because he's always been a baby. He's always been a baby. He's always had that inability to take a hit, which is why here's the thing. I've always loved my conservative friends because we pick on snowflakes. People whine and they can't take a hit, and we're just mercilessly bashing them, especially as Marines. So when I met Trump, I'm like, thank God we have a snowflake we can pick on. Surprising number of my friends were like, oh, not him. He's amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're not saying the same exact behavior.
I'll have to be honest with you, Richard. I have had this. I've had this notion that Trump is a baby in a lot of ways for a long time.
Me too.
But when someone made an attempt on his life,
yes,
that
okay. I agree.
that attitude in me, that notion that he's a baby, that was tweaked a little bit.
Absolutely.
Because
on that day he amazed me. On that day he
I didn't see it. I didn't see a baby on that day. I saw a man of courage that day, and so that makes me think. I think there's a little bit of hope. The other thing too is that Richard, I this is another one of my opinions, and I'm not going to argue for it real strongly, but I think Trump has grown up a lot in the last several years.
Well, his speech the other night was good. That was a great acceptance speech.
Yeah,
so I agree, because I expected him to break character, and he didn't. So I give you that.
I didn't hear a baby. I didn't hear a baby the other night. I didn't hear anybody gloating the other night. Right. I heard something that was mature. I heard something that was full of grace. I didn't hear. Yeah. So I think he's grown up in this process, and some people don't want to give him credit. Some people don't want to give him credit for the fact that he can grow as a human being. He can gain in wisdom. He can gain in courage. And I think we need to give him the benefit of the doubt, because he's under the kinds of pressure that I think I would probably fall apart under the same kind of pressure if it was me. So I have to give him the benefit of the doubt on that. You know.
So here's the thing. I don't know if I'll agree on benefit of the doubt, but I will definitely want to say this. Not only 100%, but 1,000% agree that he was shot on that day. Somebody died. A fireman was literally killed in front of his family. And Trump was shot and stood back up. And not only did he stand back up, he released a statement later, which was perfect. That was, even though the phone call with the Ukraine wasn't a perfect phone call, his statement that day was the perfect statement. And I remember like that night, and I've always said this. I've always said, like, what would happen? What would you do? Because I always kind of test myself. I'm like, what would you do if like Trump called Jordan Peterson one day and said, "Oh my God, I'm the author of my own devastation. I'm doing this to myself and I need help." And Jordan Peterson's like, "Oh, come on, man, we'll talk." And Trump just is like,
Jordan Peterson?
Yeah, because Jordan Peterson's who you would call is sort of like a coach to say,
okay,
"Oh my God," because Jordan Peterson's always talking about realizing how you're usually your own worst enemy, and you can realize that and kind of come out of it. I've always said, what would you do if Trump does that and actually comes out in public and says, "I've been such a baby. I've been so entitled. Oh my God, I've got to change so much." If Trump were to do that, I would fall to my knees and I would be like, "This is amazing. I'm seeing a guy that I never thought would do this." If he changes his behavior like that, I'll be the first person to say, he used to be one way and now he's no longer that way. Now he's a much better way. I'll be the first to change if he changes. And so we've got examples. He stood up after he was shot. He released a great statement that night. He then collapsed again, but then last night he was good. And if he keeps being good, then I'll be the first to say, hey, this guy can behave when he wants to.
I think he's already given us some signs of growth. And I think we can celebrate that. And I think we can compliment him on that. He doesn't have to be perfect in my eyes. I am more interested in his policies than I am in his personality. And I realize that sometimes lack of character can have an impact on your policies. I do understand that. Don't all the people who have told me that I don't understand that, I get it. I get it. However, we do have a track record of this guy who was a baby, and he did have some policies that I think were beneficial and were consistent with the American principles, our founding principles. And if that's the case, that's something for me to be thankful for. And if I can observe that that did result in restraining certain levels of evil in our society, then that's even more reason for me to celebrate it. Even if the guy is a twerp, and he is.
Well,
Okay,
and
he's definitely a twerp.
let's just
And,
hope
and,
that he
and I
keeps doing
stand
the
with you,
policies.
and I stand with you in your criticism of people who worship him. Absolutely. I think that's just absolutely, absolutely. But I think it's a little bit truncated to criticize people who worship Trump and never make the observation about the people who worship Kamala Harris.
Well, and that's the
Because
thing is that while Kamala and Biden don't have a large worship base, the one you guys have to worry about in 2028 is AOC because AOC's worshiping fan base is as strong as Trump's. So when that happens in 2028, I'm going to have a lot of conservatives and Trump fans going, "Oh my gosh, her fan base just she can't do any wrong in their eyes." It's not really Biden and Kamala don't have a huge fan base like that, but AOC does. And when that happens, then I look forward to it. I've always looked forward to like after Trumpism and some of the Democrats doing the same things that Trump did. I've always looked forward to having my conservative friends back going, "Oh man, people worship is a bad idea." And I'm like, "Yeah, man, your predecessors taught me that." And then some of you guys forgot that, and it's nice to have you back.
Well, at the end of the day, I would rather have someone vote for Trump for the wrong reasons than to refuse to vote for Trump for the wrong reasons.
Sure.
So that's kind of my summary of the whole thing, and so I believe that God has His hand in a lot of this. I don't think God is through with Trump. I think that God has a purpose for him, and I think that God can redeem him. And I have had to come to terms with the fact that that I could get so obsessed with criticizing Trump and his horrible character that
Yeah.
I forget my own flaws, my
Right.
own
Right.
failures, my own weaknesses. And so there's a sense in which I identify with the guy because this is ultimately at the end of the day, it's not about his flaws, it's about my flaws. And if I was in that situation, I wouldn't want someone to vote for me or refuse to vote for me on the basis of my flaws because then I wouldn't have a chance because I have just as many flaws as Trump does.
But you're
And
willing to
I,
agonize over them, and I think that's where Trump
yeah,
could find
that's
some opportunities. He needs to be
sure.
willing to agonize over his own flaws
And I think and
rather than deal with
that's
them.
what we can pray. That's what we can pray for him. Lord, help him. Lord, help him agonize over his flaws.
And
And that's not outside of the realm of possibilities because
it,
if he's had a reversal on a lot of things in his life, and if he's shown growth in a lot of areas, there's no reason why he can't show growth in this area. And at the end of his life, who knows what happened? I believe in a big God. I think God can accomplish a lot of things, even through a defective orange man.
well, and while I don't
So
believe in God, I'll say I hope Ben Shapiro helps him become a better person because I do know that Ben Shapiro um, a knows that he's not ideal, but has decided to throw his weight behind him anyway. Not just financially, but actually to meet him and like introduce him and show him around and try to persuade him to be a better person. So here's something that you and I might agree on: is that Ben Shapiro has a utopian idea of what Trump can accomplish over the next 4 years, and if that happens, I'm happy. And then all my complaints about the past Trump, I'll say, hey, those were my complaints back then, but I'm not seeing that now. I'm happy with how things are now. So if Ben
yeah,
Shapiro's will be done, and you could say as well as God's will be done, then we'll be happy.
yep. Well, thank you so much, Chris. Or not Chris. I'm just reading
Richard,
the word. I'm
Chris,
just reading Chris. Richard. Yeah, I'll just call you Chris. No, thank you so much, Richard. This has been a great conversation, and uh, it happened again. I learned
yeah.
something. I learned something from you.
I'm here for you,
So
man. I'm
it
here for you. I'm here for you, Christians. I'm always here to advise you, Christians, on how to be a Christian.
that's right. It happens every time because yeah, all truth is God's truth, and all wisdom is God's wisdom. And so,
Okay, yeah, we'll give
so
him credit.
I
I'm happy with that.
yeah, and I appreciate it. I appreciate your candor, and I appreciate even the times that we disagree. You know, we disagree in a way that's mature, and we don't start calling each other names. I reserve that for the text messages that I send you. So
Right,
so I appreciate it, and this was fun. And
right.
let's make sure that we keep the conversation going here because it's a great conversation. It's definitely worth having. So.
Oh, Wintry Night is going to have me on his show. I'm not sure when, but for anyone who knows the Wintry Night Christian ministry, I'll be on their show soon.
Okay, cool. That sounds great.
All right.
Thanks again, and so long, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.